I'm Richard Taco. You know, the most famous challenge to there being an existence of a God, is the problem of evil. The Epicurean challenge, it's been around for thousands of years. It's not new. When someone comes up with it and goes, how could a good God allow unfairness or suffering or torture or child cancer? How can a good God allow that? The implication being that a good God would do something to stop it if he could. So either he can't or he won't, or for whatever reason, the claim is there's probably no God. That's the claim. The problem is, let's imagine, I like imagining this God that they're talking about. The God who will not allow child suffering. Okay, let's say I'm trying to think of the worst possible thing. We can all think of something worse. Let's remove all the worst stuff known to man. God magically comes in and goes, bam, I magically wave my magic wand. No one will any longer experience or even be able to imagine this awful suffering among children, okay? You can't even imagine it because you'd be miserable even if you could imagine it. But it's just wiped from humanity. What would happen? Well, that's no longer the worst thing that you've ever experienced. Is no longer child suffering. Now, the worst thing you could ever experience is to have your house burned to the ground. And no one got hurt, but your house burned to the ground. And everyone would go around saying, because that's the worst thing you'd ever heard of, right? I could say, I can't believe in a God who would allow my house to burn down with all of my stuff in it burned to the ground. What kind of God would allow, because that would be the greatest form of suffering known to man. The greatest form of suffering would always still be the greatest form of suffering. We would just naturally lower the standard for it. So you remove people destroying each other's lives, then you remove them merely, being born out of wedlock or having no father or merely whatever. Keep lowering the standard all the way down, okay? The greatest form of evil now is getting your car stolen. Oh, why would a good God allow a car to be stolen? Like, everything else is paradise, but that is the worst thing I can think of. So you can keep lowering your standard of what is the greatest evil you'd ever experience until finally it is, I have a hangnail, is the worst experience that you could ever imagine. And all of your life would be great. You'd just be eating pizza and just experiencing pure pleasure. And then you'd get this hangnail and you'd say, I don't believe a good God could allow this hangnail, because it would consume your whole attention. It was all you'd know. So really, when we say that we can't believe a good God would allow things that we consider suffering, it's really, I can imagine actually life being much harder, much worse than this. So this is already him. He's probably already wiped out a whole lot of bad stuff that he hasn't made us experience. And even now we're just spoiled, rotten brats because we just want it to get to a point where if I stub my toe, what kind of a good God would allow me to stub my toe? In the end, what we want is to be people who just never experience any kind of suffering or any kind of upsetting. And it has really nothing to do with what we experience. Okay, here it goes. Now follow me here. Because I always crack jokes with my boys. You guys have heard me do this before. My son, who's 17, and he plays Pokemon Go. And I tell him how like 17-year-olds back in the 1940s were storming the beaches of Normandy. You know, a 17-year-old was crawling up a beach, putting down a bandolier to blow up the barbed wire, to go and fight, the world's most awful power. 17-year-old kids did that. In fact, they lied about their age to get to go into the army early. And today, our kids are doing Pokemon Go. And the kids that are playing Pokemon Go today experience higher higher amounts of depression. They actually have higher percentages of what is called PTSD. That's right, higher percentage of PTSD among kids today who are like ADD and traumatized by school and traumatized by indifference, traumatized by failure, traumatized by loud noises. We have an epidemic of kids like putting their hands over the ears because of loud noises. We have now, they have diagnosed more ADD, attention deficit disorder, more obsessive compulsive disorder, more depression, more clinical depression today than ever before, and people's lives have never been easier. You going with me? You follow me? And yet these same people, though it's never been easier, are dealing with greater forms of depression. They claim they live in abuse. They claim that just life, the construct of life is the most difficult thing in the world. And forget about the generation that didn't complain as they stormed the beaches of Normandy. I guess what I'm saying is all suffering is relative to the amount of softness of the individual. The more you are protected from suffering your whole life, the more getting a hangnail will be the end-all, be-all, greatest form of abuse and spiral you into PTSD. So I don't think the answer is to say get tough. I do think the answer is to at least be grateful. If you have an easy life like we live, at least be grateful for the easy life. And the more likely you experience or delve in or dwell on your victimhood, the less happy you are. And I've noticed people who have had outrageous abuse put on them who did not claim victimhood. They're always happier than the people who've had hardly anything done to them and yet claim to be abject victims across all fronts. You cannot be happy if you're a victim. If you do not take on victimhood, no matter what someone does to you, you will almost certainly come out victorious. I'm Richard Taco.